I've got a review today for the book Contact by Carl Sagan. Contact is a science fiction book, and in it we follow a female scientist. She is a astroradiologist, I think it is. Basically, she's an astronomer that studies the stars using radio waves. And we follow her from her childhood up through her going through college, becoming a scientist, and acquiring a position at a radio telescope lab, where she receives signals from outer space that imply intelligent life, and they have sort of coded instructions in them and all this stuff. It's a very interesting story that explores the implications of extraterrestrial life and how Earth would respond to it. That is Contact. Starting out with the plot, it was very interesting. A lot of it was very character driven to begin with, because we were just kind of following our main character, Ellie, or Eleanor, depending on who's talking to her. And we kind of just follow her through her schooling and that sort of thing, and follow her experiences for a good portion of the book. And it was very interesting to see, because Contact was written in the 1980s, and it followed the career of a female scientist, and has a bit of a commentary on how females are received in science fields. But it also gets into, a bigger picture later on. And I don't know, I think I just really have a weakness for things starting out small and just focusing on one character and then becoming so big. And this one literally becomes so big because they get signals from outer space that imply intelligent life. And it's starts with, okay, this girl, her stepdad doesn't like that she likes science. And then it goes to aliens. And I just really am a huge sucker for stories like that. And so I really enjoyed the plot of this one, especially because it does get into the implications of what aliens would mean for us. There are a lot of religious figures who kind of come into play and talk about what it would mean as far as religions go. And then there are a lot of political figures that are like, wait, we want the alien message. We don't want, this other country and blah, blah, blah. And so it's very interesting, because it has a bit of a commentary on how humans would deal with this, as well as, the actual plot of what happens. And I really enjoyed that. I am such a sucker whenever it comes to commentaries on science and religion. And yes, I loved it a lot. Moving on to the world building. The world building was basically a situation where it was kind of in the not so distant future. So it was our world. It was, I'm tempted to say it was a little unremarkable, but at the same time, I feel like the way that Sagan wrote, he made it understandable. I have some interest. I went for a physics degree to begin with, but it ended up not panning out. So I have some understanding of physics. I am very interested in astronomy as a hobby. So I have some surface level understanding of these things, but I am no actual scientist. And So the way that Sagan communicated a lot of the scientific theory was very understandable, I guess, is how I would put it. And like, I feel like I would lump that into the world building just because that's what made Ellie's world, if that makes sense, and that sort of thing. I don't know if most people would consider that world building, but I feel like the way that he gave exposition was very good, and I was very immersed in this setting. So I'm a little conflicted here because he didn't necessarily build like this whole big new world, but the world that he did build was very immersive and fascinating. So I think I'm gonna go on and say that I definitely did enjoy the world building, but with the caveat that it may not be what a lot of people are expecting, because it is a science fiction, but it's not like out there spaceship science fiction. It's just the not so distant future science fiction. Yes. And then the final thing that I talk about is characters. I really loved the characters. This book. Okay, so the main character is Ellie. She is someone that I very much identified with because I grew up loving science, and that's her thing. She grew up from a very young age. She one of the early scenes of her is her like taking apart a radio to see kind of how it works and maybe seeing if she can fix it, kind of thing. And one thing that I did when I was very young was completely take apart an old computer. I didn't fix it. Spoiler alert. I just took it apart and kind of ruined it, actually. But it wasn't working anyways, to be fair. But I identified with her because she had a very curious mind, and she was very good at science, very interested in science. And that's how I grew up as well. Like, I was the smart girl in the science classes, and you know, it's against stereotypes, and she sort of had to fight to make it known that she was good at these things, and she had to fight against, you know, her stepdad saying that it wasn't proper for a girl. And this was written back before I was born, so obviously things have changed a good bit, and the struggle for me as a person wasn't as like in your face, but I still felt the undercurrents growing up, if that makes sense. Like, people would be like, oh, you're good at science? Like, oh, okay. And I don't know, because of that, I very much related to Eleanor as a character. But also there were just a lot of interesting relationships throughout the book, especially once you got into the latter half. You get to see sort of Ellie's relationship with her sort of science-y friends, and you also get to see her relationship with certain sort of religious figures, which I thought was very interesting because she has sort of an open commentary with a few of them, and some are just straight out rejecting of her and her science, and some are just a little more curious. And I really appreciated that because those are two of my biggest interests. Like, I ended up getting a minor in religion whenever I went to college, and I just love learning about different religions, and I have a huge interest in science as well. And so, yeah, it was just very interesting to me to see all of these relationship dynamics. All the characters were very well fleshed out. Nobody was really like, just, this is a smart scientist guy, he's nerdy, he's a scientist. Like, everybody had a life, if that makes sense. Even though it was pretty much all from Eleanor's perspective, you still got the feeling that these people were real people in the world that had their own passions and their own flaws. And yes, the characters were very well developed and I enjoyed them a lot. But yeah, so that was Contact by Carl Sagan. I loved this book. I highly recommend it to anybody who especially enjoys the commentary between religion and science. I thought Carl Sagan handled that very well, very interestingly, and sort of raised questions and answered questions, but not in a this is definitely how things go way, but in a like, what if this is how things went kind of way. And I really enjoyed and appreciated that aspect, as well as the character driven aspect of Eleanor being a scientist who has her own personal struggles with it. So yes, I hope that this review was helpful to you, and I will see you around.